October, 1940. The cold wind swept across the plains of southern Poland, carrying with it a sense of dread that no map, no compass, could navigate. Auschwitz, a name that would come to haunt history, was not yet known to the world in all its horror. To those who arrived at its gates, it was simply a transfer point, one more stop in a journey that would separate families, shatter communities, and redefine the very meaning of survival. The camp loomed like a mechanical beast, its brick barracks and barbed wire fences stretching as far as the eye could see. The gates bore the infamous words, "Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free." But for the thousands who passed beneath them, those words were a cruel joke, a hollow promise that mocked their reality. Life inside Auschwitz was measured in routines, each more dehumanizing than the last. Prisoners were stripped of identity, given numbers instead of names, and thrust into a world where every day was a battle against hunger, disease, and despair. The morning roll calls were relentless, counting bodies as if they were inventory, not human lives. Men, women, and children alike stood shivering in the cold, their eyes hollow, their hearts heavy with the unspoken question, who'll survive today? Amid this suffocating despair, small acts of courage flickered like fragile candle flames. These acts were not grandiose, they were secret, quiet, and deeply human. One of the most dangerous of these acts was writing. A letter in Auschwitz was more than ink on paper, it was a lifeline, a testament that someone, somewhere, still remembered you existed. But writing carried immense risk. The SS guards patrolled relentlessly, their eyes sharp, their suspicion constant. Any hint of clandestine communication could mean execution, immediate and merciless. Yet, prisoners wrote. With scraps of paper smuggled from kitchen scraps, torn pages of books, or even thin pieces of cloth, they scribbled messages meant for loved ones outside the camp. They wrote in hidden codes, in shorthand, in tiny letters that could slip unnoticed beneath boards, inside bundles of laundry, or folded within the seams of clothing. These letters were fragments of hope, whispers of humanity, and a defiance against a system designed to erase both. Among the prisoners, a few individuals emerged as guardians of these secret words. They risked everything to keep the chain of communication alive, to ensure that voices trapped behind barbed wire could still reach the world beyond. Some were seasoned veterans of underground resistance movements, others were ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. Each letter they saved or delivered was a calculated gamble with death itself. Imagine a young woman, barely 16, crouched in a corner of a barracks. Her fingers tremble, not from the cold, but from the enormity of what she is about to do. She writes to her family in Krakow, describing a fleeting moment of kindness she witnessed, a guard slipping a piece of bread to a child, a fellow prisoner sharing a coat. Her words are careful, coded, yet bursting with emotion. Once written, the letter is folded into the tiniest of packages and hidden in the hollow of a boot. Later, it will be smuggled out by another prisoner, carried across camp boundaries, across towns, until it finally reaches someone who still believes in the existence of a world outside Auschwitz. Each letter that left the camp carried with it a story of resilience, of secret defiance, and of the desperate need to assert identity in a place determined to erase it. These letters reveal the human spirit in its rawest, most unyielding form. They show that even in the darkest hours, hope can find a way. Historical records confirm the existence of such correspondence. Prisoners like Ruth Kalaskier, a young girl from Poland, documented her life in a hidden diary, pouring her soul into every word. Others, like the anonymous authors of notes passed through the hands of sympathetic workers in underground networks, crafted messages that defied the machinery of death surrounding them. Each letter, each smuggled word, was an act of courage, and in some cases, the only trace of a life that the world would otherwise never remember. The dangers were constant. Guards patrolled with dogs, inspecting barracks, confiscating anything deemed suspicious. Writing implements were forbidden, paper, pens, and ink were contraband. A single slip, folded wrong, ink too dark, handwriting too legible, could mean not only the end of the letter but the execution of its writer. And yet, prisoners persisted. The letters were often written in fragments, smuggled piece by piece, and reconstructed in secret. Some survived weeks of transport, hidden beneath floorboards, inside hollowed bread loaves, or even in the seams of clothing. Others were intercepted, destroyed, or lost forever. The courage to continue writing, knowing the stakes, is almost unimaginable. Within the camp, networks formed quietly, invisible to the guards but vital to survival. Prisoners whispered about secret couriers, hidden paths, and sympathetic workers who would risk their lives to deliver letters to the outside world. They learned quickly that the art of communication in Auschwitz was not just about words, it was about timing, trust, and subtlety. A letter had to be convincing, undetectable, and, most importantly, maintain the hope it carried. It was in this world of shadows and whispers that some of the most poignant human stories emerged. Stories of mothers writing to children they might never see again, of husbands sending coded messages to wives across towns, of friends reassuring each other that their spirits remained unbroken. The letters became not only a lifeline to loved ones but a testament to resistance against the industrial machinery of genocide. As the months passed, prisoners adapted. They developed ingenious methods to conceal ink, create paper from unconventional materials, and hide letters in places the guards never thought to search. They also learned to encode messages with subtlety, turning ordinary phrases into secret messages, using poetry, biblical references, or even mundane accounts of daily life as camouflage. Every letter was a balancing act between truth and survival, between revealing just enough and hiding just enough. And yet, the weight of this clandestine communication was enormous. Each letter carried fear, hope, and the unspoken knowledge that discovery meant death. Prisoners often wrote under the dim light of a flickering candle, risking frostbite in winter or sunstroke in summer, listening for the footfalls of patrolling guards. Every word was precious, every sentence deliberate. These letters, smuggled from the darkness of Auschwitz to the outside world, became the hidden words of history. They remind us that even in the most oppressive circumstances, the human spirit will find a voice. They are a testament not only to the horrors endured but to the courage, ingenuity, and resilience of those who refuse to be silenced. The secret couriers. Inside Auschwitz, the act of writing a letter was only the first step. The true challenge lay in getting it out. For every message penned in secrecy, a chain of courage and risk had to follow. Letters could not simply leave the camp, they had to be smuggled, hidden, and delivered by human hands, often across miles of hostile territory. Each step demanded meticulous planning, nerves of steel, and an unshakable commitment to hope. Among the prisoners, certain individuals became indispensable. They were the couriers, the connectors between the world within the camp and the world beyond. Some were laborers assigned to the kitchens, laundries, or workshops, positions that allowed a certain degree of movement. Others were prisoners with external contacts, trusted by underground networks operating in nearby towns and villages. Each courier faced a constant balance, one misstep, one casual glance by a guard, and their mission would end in arrest, or worse. The methods of smuggling were diverse and often ingenious. Some letters were concealed in hollowed-out pieces of bread, baked in the camp ovens and passed unnoticed to workers leaving the camp. Others were hidden inside bundles of clothing, stitched into seams with needle and thread, or slipped beneath the lining of shoes. Ink was a scarce commodity, so prisoners improvised, soot from fires, vegetable juices, or even the thinnest traces of pencil lead became their tools of communication. Consider the story of Jacob Rosenberg, a young man from Krakow, who had learned to hide letters in bundles of laundry leaving the camp. Each day, he risked the scrutinizing eyes of guards, passing clean uniforms and linens outward. Inside these bundles, tiny notes were tucked, messages that described the horrors of the camp, the faint glimmers of kindness, or pleas for help. Jacob knew that the letters he carried could cost him his life, yet he continued, driven by the knowledge that words might save souls, if not bodies. Other prisoners employed coded language, turning ordinary phrases into lifelines. A sentence about fetching water could contain hidden numbers representing food parcels. Mentions of friends' health or duties might conceal details about camp conditions or the movements of guards. These letters were maps of the invisible, carefully designed to communicate critical information while remaining inscrutable to the untrained eye. The couriers who received these messages outside the camp faced their own perils. They navigated occupied territories, avoided checkpoints, and delivered letters to families, resistance networks, or underground presses. Each handoff was meticulously timed. Even a minor delay could jeopardize lives. The camp's guards were vigilant, and suspicion could spread quickly. One of the most remarkable aspects of this secret correspondence was the collaboration between prisoners and sympathetic outsiders. Residents of nearby villages, often risking execution themselves, assisted in transporting letters, food, or even medical supplies. They hid packages in farm carts, slipped notes into bread loaves for delivery, or carried bundles tucked beneath clothing as they traveled to distant towns. These silent acts of bravery were as critical to survival as the letters themselves. Among the letters that survived, certain themes emerge: hope, remembrance, defiance, and love. One note described the fleeting beauty of a sunrise over the camp, a small, almost imperceptible detail that reminded the recipient of the writer's continued existence. Another detailed the methods prisoners used to survive illness or maintain morale. Yet another simply assured family members that the writer was alive, that their spirit had not yet been broken. Each letter was a lifeline, a bridge spanning the chasm of despair that surrounded the camp. The danger was constant. Guards frequently inspected laundry, food deliveries, and prisoner belongings. Dogs patrolled the perimeters, trained to sniff out hidden messages. Prisoners learned to be creative. Letters were divided into multiple small fragments, smuggled separately, and then reassembled by recipients. Ink was sometimes invisible, requiring special techniques to read, or written in coded symbols to avoid detection. Every successful delivery was a small triumph, a reminder that resistance could take many forms, and that the human spirit could endure even under the most extreme oppression. In some cases, letters carried intelligence as well as hope. Underground networks monitored camp conditions, prisoner movements, and guard routines based on the information relayed in these secret communications. Allies in the region could prepare for possible actions, provide supplies, or document atrocities for future accountability. The simple act of writing became a form of rebellion, a weapon in a war of information fought with pens, paper, and courage. Yet the stakes were high. Intercepted letters could lead to torture, execution, or reprisals against other prisoners. Many never survived the journey. Some were lost, confiscated, or destroyed, leaving behind only the memory of what might have been. And still, prisoners continued. They wrote because to stop writing was to surrender the last fragments of humanity left to them. They wrote because the act of putting words on paper affirmed that they existed, that their stories mattered, and that the world outside could not ignore their suffering. It was in this precarious environment that the hidden words of Auschwitz began to accumulate, forming a mosaic of human experience under unimaginable duress. Each smuggled letter was a window into the daily realities of camp life, the fear, the suffering, but also the fleeting moments of kindness, solidarity, and courage that sustained prisoners. Together, these letters preserved a record of the human spirit in its most raw, unyielding form. As Part 2 closes, we see that Auschwitz was not only a place of terror but also a crucible of resistance. The letters smuggled out were more than communication, they were acts of defiance, affirmations of identity, and beacons of hope in a world designed to extinguish both. These secret correspondences ensured that the voices of the imprisoned would reach the world, leaving a legacy of courage and humanity that survives to this day. Voices beyond the fence. Each letter that reached the outside world carried more than words, it carried the soul of the writer, a piece of their reality etched in ink, smuggled from the shadow of death. Recipients often found themselves reading in secret, hiding messages beneath floorboards, inside books, or under clothes. For them, the letters were lifelines, proof that someone they loved was still alive, and evidence that the horrors of the camps could not erase humanity. One letter from a young woman named Miriam described the small routines that had kept her alive, trading scraps of bread for a moment of warmth from a fellow prisoner, sharing a whispered joke to stave off despair, counting the days by the position of the sun over the camp walls. Every detail, no matter how mundane, was an act of resistance. The very act of observing, remembering, and recording life was a defiance against the system that sought to reduce prisoners to mere numbers. Another letter, written by a father to his children, was filled with careful reassurances. He described the harshness of forced labor and the ever-present fear of selections, yet beneath the grim realities, he wove threads of hope. "Remember, my darlings," he wrote, "even in the darkest moments, courage lives in your heart. Do not forget me, and do not forget to dream of freedom." Such words, carried in secret, offered the recipients outside the camp both anguish and a profound sense of connection. Many letters contained coded language, conveying critical intelligence about the camp's operations or the movement of guards. A brief reference to watering the garden might indicate where guards were concentrated. Mentions of new uniforms could reveal the arrival of fresh deportees. Resistance networks relied on these letters to piece together patterns, anticipate changes, and, where possible, save lives. Each letter was a puzzle, a careful construction of truth hidden within metaphor, and every successfully decoded message was a small triumph against the machinery of oppression. Yet beyond codes and survival strategies, the letters were intimate glimpses into human relationships strained but not broken by confinement. Lovers wrote secret vows of devotion, friends exchanged memories of better times, and families shared scraps of news about births, illnesses, and local events outside. Each correspondence was a lifeline, affirming identity and sustaining bonds that the Nazis had attempted to sever. The psychological weight on the prisoners writing these letters was immense. They knew the risks. Discovery could result in immediate execution, yet the compulsion to communicate, to assert their existence, overpowered fear. The act of writing became both ritual and rebellion, an insistence that their lives mattered, and that they would not be erased without leaving a trace. One particularly moving letter described the simple act of noticing sunlight falling across the camp yard. The writer, a man named Samuel, painted a vivid scene of a momentary bird landing on the barbed wire fence, its wings flashing in the morning light. He wrote to his sister, "Even here, there is beauty. Hold on to it for me." The juxtaposition of nature's fleeting beauty against the horrors surrounding him made the letter a poignant testament to the resilience of the human spirit. When letters reached the families and friends outside, they often invoked extreme emotions, relief, grief, and profound anxiety intertwined. Recipients had to navigate the perilous act of keeping the messages safe. Many hid letters within walls, under floorboards, or in sewn linings of coats. Some memorized the contents and then destroyed the physical copy to prevent discovery. In every case, the words themselves carried weight far beyond paper. They were evidence, memory, and emotional sustenance all at once. Resistance groups sometimes received entire caches of letters. They carefully cataloged, decoded, and redistributed them. Each missive became a node in a network of clandestine communication, offering critical insights into camp routines, numbers, and conditions. In some instances, letters provided information that enabled the smuggling of food or medical supplies to prisoners, highlighting how written words could directly influence survival. Among the letters, recurring themes revealed both despair and unwavering resilience. Writers documented hunger and disease, yet often concluded with expressions of hope, love, or encouragement. A single line could serve as an emotional anchor: "I am still here, still fighting, still believing in tomorrow." Each phrase, though small, was monumental, a spark of life against the darkness. The letters also carried historical significance. They serve today as primary sources, providing detailed accounts of daily life in Auschwitz, the machinery of oppression, and the acts of human kindness that persisted despite overwhelming cruelty. Scholars, historians, and educators rely on these letters to reconstruct the experiences of prisoners, to humanize the numbers, and to convey the lived realities of those who endured the camp. In some extraordinary cases, letters were written collectively. Groups of prisoners would coordinate messages, each adding their observations or prayers, resulting in documents that reflected shared experience, communal resilience, and collective memory. Such letters became more than messages, they were a declaration: "We are here. We have lived. We will be remembered." As Part 3 closes, it becomes clear that these letters were not just survival tools, they were a testament to the power of words to transcend physical confinement. Through smuggling networks, coded messages, and hidden passages, the voices of Auschwitz reached beyond the barbed wire and watchtowers, connecting families, allies, and the world at large. In these fragile documents lay the undeniable proof of human endurance, hope, and the refusal to be silenced. Legacy of hidden words. As the war drew to a close and Allied forces liberated Auschwitz and other concentration camps, the letters smuggled out became more than personal testaments, they became historical artifacts. Each document, carefully preserved by families or resistance networks, offered irrefutable evidence of the horrors inflicted within the camps and the resilience of those imprisoned. Scholars, historians, and survivors recognize these letters as both proof and poetry, proof of the atrocities, and poetry of human endurance. For many survivors, the letters were the first connection to their lost loved ones, offering fragmented knowledge of who had survived and who had perished. Families clutched faded pages, ink smudged by sweat and tears, reading the words aloud with trembling hands. Even when the news they contained was grim, the letters affirmed a critical truth: someone had witnessed, someone had remembered, and someone had survived long enough to record the reality of life under the shadow of extermination. One letter, written by a young man named David to his mother, described the moments of camaraderie that sustained him: the shared meals of bread crusts, whispered encouragements during forced labor, the songs sung quietly at night to keep hope alive. When David's mother received the letter after liberation, she understood that survival had required not just strength, but ingenuity, courage, and an unwavering belief in human decency, even in the face of systematic cruelty. Historians now view these letters as essential pieces of the Auschwitz narrative. They reveal the daily routines, the psychological strategies for survival, and the interpersonal networks that prisoners relied upon. They illuminate moments of tenderness, acts of defiance, and the quiet heroism of people who were forced to endure unimaginable suffering. Letters mentioning food exchanges, secret messages, or simple gestures of kindness paint a vivid picture of human ingenuity under duress. The letters also changed how the world remembered Auschwitz. Before their discovery, some accounts of camp life were dismissed as exaggeration or rumor. The meticulously detailed letters, smuggled out and preserved, provided concrete evidence that countered denial and skepticism. They documented the mechanisms of oppression, the brutality of guards, and the relentless efforts of the Nazi regime to strip prisoners of identity and hope. More importantly, they documented resistance, not through armed struggle alone, but through the courage to communicate, to write, and to remember. In families who survived, these letters shaped generations. Children and grandchildren who read the correspondence decades later felt a profound connection to the past. They learned the importance of vigilance, the cost of hatred, and the power of words to endure when violence sought to silence them. The letters became teaching tools, moral lessons, and symbols of resilience, ensuring that the experiences of prisoners were not forgotten. Some letters were published in historical anthologies, allowing the wider world to access voices that might otherwise have been lost to time. Their narratives influenced Holocaust education, informing curricula and museum exhibitions. The letters demonstrated that even in the most oppressive circumstances, human beings could assert their identity, preserve their dignity, and communicate hope. They provided concrete examples of moral courage that continue to inspire educators, writers, and students worldwide. Beyond their historical and educational significance, the letters also served a deeply personal function. Survivors often recounted that reading or writing letters, even under the threat of death, offered a psychological lifeline. They reinforced the sense of self, reaffirmed familial bonds, and preserved humanity amidst dehumanization. Writing a letter was an act of resistance, a reminder that even under surveillance and confinement, one could assert agency. In memorials and museums dedicated to Holocaust remembrance, many of these letters are displayed alongside photographs, artifacts, and testimonies. Visitors can see the meticulous handwriting, the smudges, and the signs of hurried composition, all of which testify to the urgency and bravery inherent in each document. They are silent witnesses, telling stories that numbers and statistics alone could never convey. The impact of these letters resonates today. They remind the world that words have power, power to survive, to resist, and to testify. In an era where memory can be contested, and history sometimes denied, these letters provide undeniable proof of both human cruelty and human resilience. They are enduring symbols that even in the darkest times, voices can be heard, messages can be delivered, and hope can persist. Finally, the letters underscore a profound truth. While the Nazis sought to erase lives, identities, and voices, prisoners refused to be erased. Their words survived where many did not. They carried fragments of truth across fences, into hidden compartments, and across borders, ultimately reaching the wider world. Each letter is a triumph of spirit, a declaration of existence, and a testament to the indomitable human will to be remembered. As we reflect on the hidden words from Auschwitz, we honor not only the messages themselves but the people who wrote them. They risked everything for a few lines of text, for a fleeting chance to connect with the outside world, for the hope that someone, someday, would hear their voices. Their courage, creativity, and resilience endure, echoing across generations. In the end, these letters remind us that even in the most unimaginable circumstances, the human spirit cannot be extinguished.